Putin's grip is relatively solid, but it seems there's protests picking up in the last couple of months.
Well, the reason why you don't hear it because they try to silence all what's happening, because as soon as they start showing protests, people are gonna start thinking we are not alone, we have a voice. People start talking at least with their closest friends who they can trust. Now more and more people are affected by this war. It's not longer like something distant. Almost every single Russian knows somebody who died in the war. The Russian media propaganda will do everything possible to silence those people.
The more vocal people are in Russia, it pressures Putin to hopefully come to the negotiating table.
The most dangerous part for him is not that he can lose or win the war or whatever. No, it's the people, because they are the ones who can take him out of power. And who is he without power? Like, who is gonna save him? Who's gonna protect him? The war for him is kind of the way to extend his rule indefinitely.
Is there anyone that can stand up to Putin now?
It's very hard to speak against Putin right now. He has always been paranoid, and now it's just more than ever. He just keeps purging his inner circle. People who he could have trusted are no longer around him. People are already starting to be either neutral or negative towards war. It's just gonna amplify, and this is when it can spill over towards more and more protests, and then who knows what happens.
How are you?
Good. How are you doing, Mario?
I'm good, man. I'm good. I've just been watching your videos. You've been doing YouTube for 5 years, and I see the pivot you've made in the last few years. Congratulations on the massive growth.
Thanks so much. Actually been doing even longer than that, some Russian stuff first.
Oh, wow.
Like solving Rubik's Cube. So 2008, 2009, I think, when I
Oh,
created
wow.
channel.
OG.
16 years when the how's it called, when the outline where the interface was completely different. And
Did you live in Canada for a while? You still live? I don't know where you live now.
In Canada, yes, since 2019. Until
Okay,
then
still in
Florida,
Canada now.
until then Russia. Yes. So far, so
Okay.
yes, in Russia. Yeah, I mean Canada, yes.
Canada.
Mhm.
I don't
Yes.
think you can go back to Russia now, Artem.
Hopefully at some point, but not now. Is not a good time. That's right.
I was just
Hopefully.
speaking to someone called David Zhang from China. He's very critical of Xi Jinping. The same thing. He told me, like, Mario, if I go to China now, I'll probably be arrested. It's people love to criticize, including myself. We love to criticize imperfect democracies like the censorship we're seeing in the US, Canada, Europe, the UK, but we forget like the alternative was pretty shit. Like I wouldn't want to live in China, for example. But also pretty surprised. Before we start, I was surprised to find out. I'm not sure if you know this. In the UK, there's more people arrested for what they've said online, about 3 times more than in Russia. Have you seen that number?
Never. First time I
How
hear
crazy is that? Yeah.
Insane.
How crazy is that? 3 times more people. 3,000 people arrested. I think it was last year in the UK for things they've said online. They call it hate speech. And Russia during war, in times of war, big bad Russia only arrested, I think it was about 600. Still a lot. 600 is still a lot. But
Yes.
that's what they report. But the UK is becoming pretty scary.
Yeah, that's the thing. This is why Russia is so successful at silencing people, because they take 600 people and they put it everywhere. News, Telegram channels, media, because they just make it so big. So all the people are in the future who want to talk bad about Putin or something, they see this as an example and like, okay, I better stay silent because this is going to happen to me if I don't keep my mouth shut. But in UK, I'm assuming they don't promote it that much, that people get arrested for what they say online. So, and as you can see, it's 5 times more than what happens in Russia. That's how propaganda works and everything. I know, right?
What's happening in Europe is crazy. Just on that point, one of the videos you've talked about the growth in opposing voices online. Telegram channels getting a lot of members. You've got people doing a lot of protests online. Billboards, victory billboards being torn down. You've got kind of decentralized resistance. You made a whole video about it. Graffiti coming up constantly, more than ever. Enlistment officers getting burnt down across Russia as well. I think it's about 130 of them that were burnt down. What's going on there? Is it really, because we don't hear much about it. It seems that Putin's grip is relatively solid. But it seems there's murmurings, and I was talking to someone. He's got another YouTube channel called, I think, Inside Russia, Konstantin. He's talking about protests picking up in the last few weeks, I think, or last couple of months.
Well, the reason why you don't hear it and we don't hear it much even inside Russia, because once again they try to silence all what's happening, because as soon as they start showing protests here, protests there, then yes, of course, people are gonna start thinking, I mean Russians, we are not alone, we have a voice, let's go on the streets and blah blah blah. But yeah, they suppress all this kind of stuff, so it's not that public. That's why it doesn't feel like that something is happening in Russia. And like you said, that it still feels like that his grip on power is very strong, which is maybe not as strong as several years ago, but still kind of strong, but not as strong. And once again, yes, definitely it does happen inside people's minds. At least people start talking, at least with their closest friends who they can trust, inside families, parents, girlfriends, wives, husbands. People start talking about this because now more and more people are affected by this war. It's not longer like something distant, something happening thousands of kilometers away. Almost every single Russian knows somebody who died in the war, or maybe their relative died in the war. So more and more people are affected by the war directly. So obviously you cannot not talk about this at this point.
Yeah, I remember. So I went to Kiev and Moscow earlier this year, last year. I lost track. And one thing that was funny in Moscow is that so I was walking with someone, pretty vocal person, pretty influential, and privately, he would talk about everything. Very objective person, supporter of Putin, but critical of the war, and has very nuanced stance. And then when we're walking on the street, he just gave me a tour of the central Moscow. He's going around for a walk. He would still talk freely on the streets, but then there's certain areas where there's cameras. Like, Mario, let's pause the discussion now, especially when we were talking about what's really happening in the war and who's really winning, who's got progress, casualty figures. And when we talked about Prigozhin is a massive no-no right now. They're still scarred by what happened 2 years ago. But going back to your video, are we seeing a pick up in protests, or is it too small to even discuss right now?
It's definitely happening once again in smaller circles. We don't see, or at least maybe there are some kind dozen people, 100 people going on the streets or some in some distant towns and regions. But once again, the Russian media propaganda will do everything possible to silence those people, to silence those things. But once again, speaking to my friends, speaking to my family was always kinda, let's put it straight to the point, I guess, against the regime, whatever Putin was doing all the way since the beginning, since the early 2000s. So every single year was just worse and worse and worse. But even friends, somebody who in the beginning, for example, they were like in the first months of war, they were posting on their Instagram, it was still allowed in Russia without VPNs. They were posting like, you can hate your government, but you cannot go against your country. Things like this, like quotes from like old Russian books or movies, like Brother, this movie about Sergei Bodrov and everything. And then, yes, so once again, years later, they kind of like, let's not talk about it. It's okay. Like, I don't like the war maybe that much anymore. I don't want to speak about this anymore. Like, this family, what I'm talking, who I'm referring to, not this particular person, but her sister's husband died in Ukraine. So obviously, as soon as it happened, she completely switched. She completely turned. It was like, yeah, Russia, go ahead. We need to denazify Ukraine, blah, blah, blah. Now it's like she just lost a husband. She lost the father of her kids. So how can you still support the war? Like, that's absolutely nonsense. And because of things like this, yeah, once again, we don't see big protests, hundreds, thousands of people on the streets right now, even though small of them might happen some in distant regions, not in Moscow, not in St. Petersburg yet. They might be happening, but they try to kill this in the media, so they don't show it. But inside people's heads, it's definitely switching. And I'm talking this because of I speak once again with my friends. I don't think I can recall any single friend who still unconditionally supports the war. Maybe there's one girl who is like kind of neutral to this. I have friends who are soldiers. They're cool guys, cool people. We have fun whenever they come in their like vacations and everything. But other than that, that's pretty much it. Not a single friend openly supports it anymore.
So the tide is shifting.
Inside heads, at least for many people, hopefully majority.
But that's where it starts.
People,
it
yes.
starts there before people become vocal online, use a VPN to be more active online under anonymous accounts, and eventually that leads to the streets. So it starts boiling over in people's minds. Hopefully that's the case. And I'll tell you why I think hopefully that's the case. I don't want unrest in any country because I think unrest always leads to more deaths. Like I was, I'm critical of Putin, but I'm even more critical against Prigozhin, for example. But at the same time, I want the war to end. And for the war to end, both sides need to be pressured. I think Zelensky's pressured enough. Look what's happening in Pokrovsk and Kupiansk and the progress that Russia's having. You might disagree on that, but I think Zelensky has enough pressure right now. Putin's pressuring him. Trump's pressuring him. On Putin's side, he doesn't have that same pressure, at least not now. He had it a while ago when the war was starting, but now he's too deep into that war. He's got a lot of territory in. Any form of pressure would get us closer to a deal where both sides meet somewhere in the middle. We saw the discussions in the last call between Zelensky and meeting between Zelensky and Putin, and call between Zelensky and Trump, a call between Putin and Trump, where what the reports at least they said that Putin wanted the two oblasts, the Donbass, Donetsk and Luhansk. He wanted full control of those, and freezing the lines in Zaporizhia and Kherson, or some reports about even giving up some territory. Zelensky just wanted to freeze the lines as they are. So there needs to be something to push him in the middle. And I think there's nothing more influential, at least to a dictator or a supreme leader, whatever you want to call President Putin, but any leader of a country that doesn't have a term limit. The biggest worry is the people going against him. So I think the more vocal people are in Russia, I don't want unrest, but at least it pressures Putin to hopefully come to the negotiating table. What do you think?
That's exactly what you just said. Person with the unlimited term who is going to be in power. Like literally, you ask any single person in Russia right now, how long you think Putin is going to be our president? 90% will say until he dies, or even whenever he's going to be like not appearing on TV anymore, somebody else is going to be the face of Russia. If he's still conscious and makes kind of reasonable decisions, he's still going to be controlling that person who will appear as the president of Russia. But coming back to once again what you said, exactly, the most dangerous part for him is not that he can lose or win in the war or whatever, acquiring Kherson, Zaporozhye, Donetsk, Luhansk. No, it's the people, because they are the ones who can take him out of power. And who is he without power? He is not going to have anything. Like, who is going to save him? Who's going to protect him? All the oligarchs, all the inner circle who he raised since the 90s along him, around him, and then pretty much betrayed him for their loyalty. As soon as you say something what he doesn't like, you are out of the window, or you drink some poisoned Russian tea, things like this. And so, yes, once again, the war for him is kind of the way to extend his rule indefinitely. I don't know how long he has. He has been speaking, obviously, like some conspiracy theories kind of stuff, organ transplants, so he can live for like 140. Obviously, that most likely is ridiculous, but he wants to live as long as possible, and he can only live for as long as he is the president, because what happens when he's no longer in power? Who's going to protect him? Who's going to give shelter to him? Who's going to hide him? Nobody. And so, yeah, this war just continues to let him keep the power, because the best thing to unite your people inside your country is the external enemy. As long as the external enemy, people will be united. As long as you feel that the support is waning, you can start another wave of propaganda saying like, we're about to break through here, we're about to capture this, or like, very influential Ukrainian politic just got caught in a corruption case, and then you just push it, people get united even more. Or like, if Ukraine is no longer interesting subject for the Russian people, now you can say Finland, I don't know, is doing some marine training next to our sea borders, whatever. Another enemy now suddenly appears in the Russian propaganda, and this just unites people. Because, yeah, as soon as the war stops, people will be like, okay, exhale, let's see, let's come back to our normal, regular lives. And wait a second, the salaries are not so big anymore, like I was making, assembling drones, because the Russian economy is now the military economy. Or like the TV is not showing much interesting stuff anymore, so people will start thinking, people will start analyzing, what was this war for? Why did it start? What was achieved? Do we really need these Luhansk, Donetsk regions? Like, we've never even been there, so what that we have it now? Like, it's just the map changed, but it's not like I'm gonna go there for tourism or anything like this. People will be like, okay, but I cannot still go to Europe, to America, because visas for Russians are always denied. So apparently my life became much worse than it was before war. So maybe the decision to invade was not so good after all. And so these are exactly the thoughts that Putin is afraid, because this thought process, which we discussed in the previous question, that people are already starting to be either neutral or negative towards war, it's just going to amplify. And this is when it can spill over towards more and more protests, reach all the way Moscow, St. Petersburg. And then who knows what happens? We only can hope it happens.
Whew. So
I know.
that's the argument being made against Netanyahu. So one of the reasons Netanyahu does not want the war to end, war against Gaza, war against Iran, war against Lebanon, war against Syria, is that he's facing obviously legal challenges. He's got to appear in court again soon. I think I read somewhere, corruption charges, whatever it was. And he'll have to face the consequences of what happened on October 7th. And a similar argument is being made about Putin, that Putin's incentives to end the war is not as it's not that great, because two reasons: because people will start to reflect on the war. Was it really necessary? Number two, Russia's economy has become a war economy. Now, economists disagree how quickly a war economy can pivot to just a normal economy again. So I've had different guests that gave different takes on it. But on the first point about people reflecting on the war and the consequences of the war, you made the point that who's going to protect Putin after if he steps down. So my question to you is, number one, what are the options of people that could replace Putin? Because a lot of people talk about some people around Putin are more hardline than Putin himself. So it's not a great thing to have a replacement. And number two is, why are you so confident people will turn against Putin? Because another way to frame the war is that, hey, we managed to gain territory. The economy is still doing okay, and that's before a peace deal. A peace deal will probably include opening up the economy to the rest of the world, opening up to the American, to the Western financial system, to the SWIFT system, certain economic agreements with the US, maybe even Europe, opening up oil exports to Europe. All this seems great for the Russian economy. So if anything, it seems that when the war ends, the economy could do better, and Russia gained territory, and he can call whatever peace deal is reached, based on how things are looking now, a win for Russia. Hey, the Donbass has been reunited with Russia. And Putin may come out stronger from the war. What do you think of that take?
So you want me to begin with, there were three questions, I think. There were kind of big ones. Economy was the third one. Who is going to protect Putin? And why am I confident that, once again, what was the second question? I forgot. Which one you want me to focus on first?
Against Putin? You can go as you wish. You can merge them all together. The last one was, why do you think people would turn against Putin if he gains territory and the Russian economy does better?
There. And the people we mean here, his inner circle, or just the general Russian population?
Actually, good point. We could do both. The oligarchs obviously have a lot of influence in Russia, his inner circle as well, but mainly the population, the ones that call the shots, because no one in his inner circle could replace him if people don't support that person.
Okay, so first, I guess, quickly to mention why nobody wants to shelter to protect Putin. I think Prigozhin rebellion perfectly showed that as soon as he was going towards Moscow, as soon as he was stationed in Ryazan and everything first, no police tried to stop him, no local so-called army tried to stop him, roadblocks did not appear pretty much. The local residents, citizens were filming, cheering for Wagner, taking pictures with them, wishing them luck. As soon as they start going towards Moscow, the only thing that they were able to do, they took these excavators, so they destroyed the roads towards Moscow. That is literally the only resistance that was shown. And that's it, like you can see the flight radar and everything, all the oligarchs' private jets started flying away from Moscow to distant regions, to, I don't know, whatever unsanctioned European cities they could, to southern regions, to, I don't know, wherever, St. Petersburg. Putin's even plane took up in the sky, and then they deactivated this, whatever it's called, like the radar, the tracker that shows where the plane is. That's it. As soon as Prigozhin was like 200-300 kilometers away from Moscow, the entire Kremlin pretty much was empty. The only people who were left there were, like, I don't know, interns and some lower level employees, janitors, I don't know, things like this. The whole Kremlin was empty. No one was protecting each other. Nobody was caring about each other. Everyone was just caring about their own lives, about their own fortunes, because it was even the slightest possibility. Because let's be honest, even when Wagner was marching towards Moscow, the probability of him actually ending the rebellion in what we all hoped for was very minimal. But even this was still enough for every single top Kremlin official to just, okay, guys, I'm out of here, wherever. Don't call me, I disappear in the background. So long story short, this was, I guess, the answer maybe to the first question, why nobody wants to shelter Putin, because once again, Prigozhin, Wagner rebellion showed that they do not care about each other. Loyalty means almost nothing inside the Kremlin walls. Why would people go against Putin if the war ends? Both inner circle and regular people. Inner circle, for once again, I think it's more or less related to the first answer what I just gave. Regular people, once again, yes, at first victory will be presented as like it's almost the Second World War type of victory. We liberated the entire Europe from Nazis, we protected everyone, Russia is the greatest, we acquired new territories along the way. But then, yes, people like, okay, nice, let's celebrate it. Maybe there's going to be a new holiday, new Victory Day parade. Every year they're going to celebrate on the Red Square, things like this. Victory over Ukrainian Nazism, whatever you call it, like this. But then still, people were like, okay, so what? Like, my life did not significantly improved. My relative, my friend died probably in Ukraine. Hundreds of thousands of people will be able to, unfortunately, say it. So, like, was it all worth it? And then I guess, to transition to the third question about the economy, which will support the answer to why people will also not like the outcome of this war. You mentioned that a lot of economists mentioned that transition back to the normal economy from the wartime economy will not be swift, and I agree with this. I also have the degree in the economy, finance and everything. I also made several videos about this topic. It is a wartime economy. It can only survive and last majority for as long as there is war going on. Factories get repurposed. Factories that build buses, cars, whatever, the one that were shut down for several decades, years, they're just being reopened again. Now they construct, I don't know, tanks, armored personnel carriers, ammunition, bullets, rockets, missiles. People assemble drones. People from smaller regions, they get offered, for example, to be working, I don't know, as a janitor for 20,000 rubles, $250, and then they see advertisement, come assemble drones. Just you sit, you don't need to do much, just assemble drones, whatever it is. You can now make 80,000 rubles, which is like 750, I don't know, like 4 times more money that you've been making as janitor, doing almost same or less. So obviously people go, these normal so-called industries, they kind of not shut down, but they see significant reduction in the people working there, transportation infrastructure, public health care, everything. Doctors also, Russian doctors do not make much money, but then they start, instead of helping patients, they start, I don't know, like sewing together uniforms and still making 4 times more than they've been doctors. And so that's it, war is over, there is no longer demand for uniforms.
Yes, wouldn't that change? So on that point, wouldn't that change if Russia's economy opens up and there's some deals, some oil exports to Europe, opening up exports to India again, the prices won't be discounted like they have to the current buyers, India, China, and others, and certain business deals with the US. When they open up their economy must boom.
It might help a little bit, but still it cannot just ignore that there has been a war going for 3, 4, or however long it's going to take. It cannot just ignore that there has been war going for so long. The inflation is already there. The Central Bank of Russia already reports it in double digits, and this is the official number what they give us, which basically means it most likely is even higher than it is. My parents buy groceries.
The official rate is 9%, but the unofficial independent estimates are 25% inflation.
Exactly. So my parents, buy groceries, they buy plane tickets. There's no obviously direct flights between Moscow and Miami anymore, but this is like literally as long as it gets. Moscow to Miami could have been $1,500 tickets. Now ticket to Turkey, for example, can be already $2,000. And obviously Moscow to Turkey is much closer than Moscow to Miami.
Very short flight. It's not that long, isn't it? Turkey to Moscow is like 10 hours?
Turkey to Moscow, like 3 hours, even less.
Oh, wow.
So, and it's
3
more
hours,
expensive.
$2,000.
Exactly. So this is even more expensive than, once again, the 12, 14-hour flight to Miami. So there is inflation. Obviously, the reason for the inflation is people, salaries. Once again, when you make 4 times more doing something military related, you get more. And then those people who sell you, or like for example in military signing bonuses, 5 million rubles, you just put your signature, go to the army, immediately you supposedly get 5 million rubles. Then monthly salaries of $200,000, death benefits also in millions of rubles. People just buy apartments, buy cars with this money. They travel, they buy groceries, they buy clothes. So overconsumption obviously stimulates the economy, creates the inflation. Things, prices get adjusted, gets more expensive. But what about those people who stayed? Janitors, doctors, or in the regular infrastructure.
They get left out of the war economy.
Exactly, they still make 20,000 rubles, but now their rent instead of 6,000 rubles is 15,000 rubles. So they can just barely. So what they have to do, they're forced to look for a new job, which is only like what? Military related. Everyone goes to military related, war is over, there is no need in tanks, there is no need in bullets anymore, there is no need in uniforms anymore, these people get fired, and would you want to go back working for 20,000 rubles when you used to make 200,000 rubles? So the transition will not be as smooth and will not be as fast.
War economy it leads to higher salaries for people involved in the war economy. That leads to inflation. But the people that are not making those high salaries, that are left out of the war economy, that remain janitors, remain doctors, suffer from the high inflation without having their salaries increase, which could backfire as the economy comes out of a war economy. Going back to the initial point you were making about Putin's grip on power, there's been some developments that reaffirm something you've been warning about for a while in many of your videos. And something I've been fascinated by since the Prigozhin mutiny is, I think people just forgot about that day. I remember covering that day as just one of the most just difficult to fathom the extent of how fast that mutiny developed. But then the world kind of moved on. And for me, I kept trying to see, is there any other, other fractures within that grip that people are not spotting or talking about? Now, you've been talking about it for a while, and there's been some developments recently that kind of point at potential challenges Putin's facing. One, Lavrov, and there's been a lot of people talking about it in the last couple of days. Lavrov was found missing from an important Kremlin meeting that he was expected to be attending, and he's not going to be attending the G20 summit. Someone more junior is going to be attending. So that's number one. So people are speculating, is there a fallout between Lavrov and Putin? Now, we all know Lavrov wants to retire. He said, I interviewed him once, and it thought something he joked about. Like everyone's talking about him retiring after the war. So maybe it's just the process has started of him stepping away from the limelight. He's done his job. But some are speculating something more sinister. Before we dig into other developments like the generals being arrested in recent months, especially in the last couple of years, let's talk about Lavrov. What are your thoughts on that?
So Lavrov, he has been already in the diplomacy, I don't want to call it business, but line of work, I guess, appropriate work, for a long time already. Years, obviously. He also is the graduate from the university where I went back in Moscow, so I think I saw him once, twice. Before the war, he was a very well-respected diplomat. He was incredible person, strong leader. Some people even considered, in case Putin steps down or is old, or maybe there is some kind of mythical transition of power, Lavrov was basically not maybe the number one selection as the potential candidate after Putin, but he was there like among the top. Now, yes, when the war started, I think the biggest downfall was for Medvedev. He literally just turned himself into a clown, he just wakes up drunk on vodka the last day.
We're going to nuke the US. We're going to nuke them again.
Yes,
Let's nuke them again. That's Medvedev.
Yeah, this is the biggest downfall of the Russian politics. He was not the most maybe respected person, even when he was normal guy, I guess, before the war, before 2014. But he was okay. Now it's a complete joke. Lavrov, what I started with, he was extremely strong personality. Every person who went to the university, I went for the international relations, wanted to be like Lavrov. He was just incredible. Now he is also turning himself into not as bad as Medvedev, but still kind of like with all the statements he makes, also like, let's nuke US, we are the strongest country in the world, we don't listen to anyone, like saying bad words like under the microphone, like Russian words, like I don't know if I can say them or not here, but you get the idea.
You can say that
so,
here.
Блять, and everything. Дебилы. And so long story short, this is also like some kind of process. What we saw, especially with Medvedev, prime example, is that this is kind of a survival mechanism. This is a very interesting theory, which kind of makes sense. It's not a conspiracy theory because we do see it happening in real life. But long story short, why people like Medvedev with the absolutely ridiculously crazy statements, why they survived the regime of Putin, while somebody who just says, I don't like the war, we shouldn't have invaded, and then within a week he falls out of window. Why Medvedev says absolutely outrageous things and he's alive. Once again, it's some kind of a survival mechanism for him. If he wants to stay alive during Putin, be relevant, say things and people listen to you, be invited to, I don't know, Solovyov propagandistic TV show, you have to show yourself to Putin as absolutely not challenger to power. Because people in Russia see also Medvedev as an absolute clown. Not too many people listen to him, they see him as a ridiculous clown. And this helps his image of the clown to that, okay, he is no longer, he will no longer try to be the president of Russia, so he is no longer a threat to Putin. For this reason, Putin kind of keeps him, say whatever you want, do whatever you want, you're not a threat to me anymore. So long story short, what we see right now is Lavrov, that he also kind of made his rhetoric kind of ridiculous, clownish. He was also kind of maybe showing himself that he's no longer this strong diplomat that every single graduate from this university wanted to become. Now he's also kind of a little bit clownish, childish with all the statements, unserious statements. So maybe this also can be a survival mechanism. So he is old as well. So not him showing up on these important meetings inside the Kremlin, not being invited or not participating. I mean, G20, maybe this is, yes, a transition to kind of peaceful, quote-unquote, retirement. Because, yeah, you first of all show yourself not a threat to the regime of Putin. You do not show yourself as a potential next president. Retire, be forgotten, live somewhere in Sochi, and that's pretty much it. I think this is literally the only so-called quote-unquote peaceful way to retire in Russia if you've been working inside the Kremlin.
So you think there's no split between him and Putin, or there's no disagreements?
It's not palpable as
a common strategy in Russia, even China and other countries, is that when there's someone that Putin's not happy with, obviously the extreme cases, they fall out of a window, but prior to that, they just step down or slowly disappear from the limelight until eventually they step down. Shoigu, I think, went through that process. Post the mutiny. But you don't think that's the case with Lavrov? I'd be surprised if that's the case, to be honest. From what I know, that they're pretty close, him and Putin.
Shoigu and Putin was definitely like, you can feel the tension between them. Every time there was a meetings, they were kind of not looking at each other. Shoigu was always like looking down, never looking at Putin. So there was definitely tension. Telegram channels were talking about it, and like whenever Shoigu was appointed, I forgot his title, but when he no longer became the Minister of Defense of Russia, it was like everyone knew it was going to happen. With Lavrov, yeah, once again, maybe because Shoigu never ridiculed himself. He was kind of doing some childish stuff, but he never made outrageous statements. Everything was professional, quote-unquote, within his line of work. He was just making announcements, blah, 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 but he was never, like, impulsive. He was never emotional. He was never saying, like, once again, these bad things during the interviews. He was trying to keep it calm, neutral, and professional. So, yeah, like, eventually these tensions spilled over and they separated. With Lavrov, I don't feel the same.
There's also a lot of generals that were arrested, a massive amount of generals that were arrested since the war began. 16 generals have been arrested. And there's also been talks about a split or disagreements between the FSB and the military. FSB is like the domestic FBI, the Russian FBI. And the developments on that front, in late August, there's been a lot of arrests of generals. There's 16 since the war began. A few were in August. A lot of them were in August. So what are we now, November? So 3 months ago, for the reasons were battlefield setbacks, but more importantly, liquidity shortfalls in military funding. So corruption, I guess. That's what at least the reason that was given. That's usually the reason that's provided for whenever there's a purge. September, October, the FSB detained over a dozen high rankers, including logistics chief, on embezzlement charges. And November this month, and there's been more arrests as well. And there's one analyst that called it a generational change in the defense ministry, paralyzing command structure. I know you talk a lot about this and about Putin's grip on power. Have you been keeping up with the developments? Have you heard about friction between the FSB, the Russian FBI, and the military? And also, what does that say about Putin's grip?
I do hear things now and there, like I'm maybe not following them extremely closely as I used to be, even though obviously I do have to keep track of it. So, and also the magnitude, the importance of people who are being arrested, maybe majority of them are not as big as used to be in the past, like not the assistant to Shoigu, but first deputy, I think, of Shoigu, Timur Ivanov, whenever he got arrested, or even Shoigu himself. These were like the big people, the one that everyone spoke about. Now maybe these are some generals. Once again, majority of the charges they're arrested with are corruption. This is the most traditional charge that you can get, and maybe most of them are true, because once you are all the way this high in the power, once you're a general who never has to probably fight a single combat in his life anymore, when you're in charge of billions of rubles, because once again majority, like, I don't remember the exact percentage, but it is like between 20 and 30% right now, I think, of Russia's GDP goes towards defense and military spending. I mean, this once again, not even billions, trillions of rubles we're talking about. So what's like 1 million here, 1 million here? That's like 0.001% of the total amount of money that goes through you. And so, I will not be surprised if these corruption charges, majority of them will be true. But this is like the easiest charge, because this is like the least, this is like the charge that Russian people hear every single month. Somebody got arrested because of corruption. They don't even bother researching this person anymore. Like, oh, again, another person who stole millions of rubles. Let's move on. But whenever somebody gets arrested on treason charges, or like speaking against Putin, or like something really significant, not what usually happens, this is when some people start, okay, wait a second. What did this guy say? What did he do? Things like this. Why he spoke against Putin? So this is when people become a little bit more politically involved in this particular case. And this is maybe what also Kremlin wants to avoid, like people being politically involved.
So that instead of putting treason, they'd always put corruption, because people just ignore it and move on.
Especially corruption, people just move on, but treason or something like high charges, high profile cases, once again, this will definitely get much more media attention than just simple corruption charges.
Okay, yes. But if there is someone treason, you're saying that the Russian, the FSB, for example, if they arrest someone for treason, would they say it's for treason, or would they just label it corruption so that to avoid media attention?
If the person like did something really bad, maybe they will try to put just as a corruption. But if it's a treason which is kind of acceptable, I don't know if there is an acceptable level of treason, maybe they can quickly mention it, just do a one news segment at 9 p.m, 5-minute segment, this guy got arrested for treason, hoping people will not hear it. Because at the same time, if you just say corruption, it just doesn't make sense, every single one of them. It should be some
one would believe it anymore.
Variety. Yes, okay. It should be some kind
you gotta mix it up sometimes. Yes. So I want to go back to Putin's grip on power, though, because another development that happened, not sure if we're looking too deep into it, but it's definitely questionable. And what are we now, November? So 11th of September, the National Guard, which is, I think the National Guard is tasked with keeping internal security. They report directly to Putin. They also protect the Kremlin. So they revived tank units. So they started having tanks in the National Guard after the Prigozhin mutiny. And then they revived their tank units a month ago, stating that for the first time, tanks and anti-tank guns, self-propelled artillery, and multiple launched rocket systems have been brought into service. So a lot of people are saying that's a lot of military equipment for an organization, a military group that's meant to keep internal security and have those equipment in Moscow and near the Kremlin. And a few weeks later, 2 weeks later, so late September, 2 months ago, the UK intelligence, according to the Ministry of Defense, assessed that the National Guard has, quote, established tank units as part of a wider expansion of its heavy weaponry. The reporting frames this as part of a trend of militarizing the National Guard, giving what was primarily, I can't say that word, an internal security and regime protection force more conventional combat firepower. So a lot of people have started wondering, especially with all those arrests by the FSB, that either Putin's becoming paranoid, but then why now? It's been 2 years since the mutiny, or there's something going on. You see all these arrests, talks about friction between or split between the FSB and the military, because the FSB is investigating the military, getting more powers over the military. And now we've got the National Guard getting heavy military equipment, anti-tank guns, self-propelled artillery, and multiple launch rockets. So I'd love to get your thoughts on all this, but also covering the general question on your thoughts on Putin's grip on power. Because people always like to say, mutiny this, Putin's facing struggles there even before the war, or Putin is sick. But here he is.
No, well, long story short, why it was not happening right after the mutiny, why they did not assign tank divisions, battalions, tank groups, unity, anti-tank, whatever, like artillery systems, multiple. Why it did not happen right after the mutiny? Because at that time the war was still in its active stage. There was a huge shortage of this equipment on the front lines. So, well, they had to prioritize. They had to put tanks on the front lines. However long they survived on the front lines, some 1 month, some 1 year, whatever. So well, they had to prioritize. There was extreme shortage of those things. Now, once the war kinda settled down, even though the losses are still in 3 digits, 4-digit numbers, sometimes daily, but still the war is not as active as it used to be 2 years ago. Even take a look at the map. The changes are microscopic. You have to zoom in to see the changes unless there's like a significant battle which happens once every quarter or something. So now, yes, especially also with the militarization of the economy, more and more people are employed in the military sector. So the production significantly, I guess I can say it, increased. So now they have spare tanks, multiple launch rocket system, artillery units. They have spare equipment to give to, once again, Rosgvardia, internal unit which is supposed to protect the peace inside Russia. Why would they do it even at all? Yes, once again, since the arrests are happening, obviously they're not gonna say there's something happening in Kremlin right now. The Russian propaganda is never gonna acknowledge it unless it's already too late. Even the mutiny itself, whenever it was already happening, they tried to delay it for as long as possible. They did not show that this is happening. They still kept giving frontline updates from Ukraine. This is what happened, this is what happened. And Prigozhin was already with his army and Ryazan on the way to Moscow. It was already when it was impossible to ignore, they started to talk about it. So for this reason, yeah, I don't think we're gonna hear about any upcoming mutiny until it's already happening. We're not gonna know the person who is going to be at the head of it, who is going to be the leader of this mutiny, for the very same reason. It is even hard to say right now who has that much power and influence in Russia, who can even start it, unfortunately, I would say. So yes, maybe something is happening, some smaller generals, maybe they feel unsatisfied, maybe even same stuff as Prigozhin, saying you don't give my boys, my guys too much, enough bullets, we don't have ammo, where is the ammo? And well, they already know how it ended up with Prigozhin, so they tried to shut down him.
So he stripped away the power of anyone that could, after what happened with Prigozhin, he wanted to play it safe, became a bit paranoid, and rightly so. So he did strip away the power or the amount of influence anyone with power had. But so 2 questions there then. First, do you think there is, like, those rumblings of people standing up to Putin or starting to oppose Putin, do you think there's any truth to it? Or again, more theories that have no indicators of any truth? And number 2, is there anyone that can stand up to Putin now?
There is, it's very hard to speak against Putin right now. He has always been paranoid, and now it's just more than ever. It's extremely on the high levels of paranoia right now, even more than probably several years ago. Because yes, once again, he just keeps purging his inner circle. People who he could have trusted are no longer around him. There was this guy,
Dmitry Kozak.
Exactly, that one, who was helping him pretty much since 90s to establish. Now he retired. He was like one of the closest Putin's advisors, friends, and everything gone. Simple as that. So if people like this are gone from the Putin's inner circle, who else is left there? Who else is there to trust him? So yes, every single dissident, every single word that he doesn't like, every single statement that somebody makes that Putin doesn't like, for him what he thinks is better be safe than sorry. It's not like I have much more loyal friends around me. all these people who are around me are just my employees who I probably never even seen in my life. So what's the matter? It's gonna be Alexander Dmitriev here working in Kremlin, or Dmitry Alexandrov, who is going to be. It doesn't matter to me. I'm never gonna meet them in my life. I'm just gonna be sitting inside my bunker or wherever behind closed doors, and only the assistant is going to bring in and out papers from me, and I'm just gonna take all decisions by myself. Nobody's gonna influence me. Nobody's gonna take away power from me. I don't know if it makes sense.
Yeah, no. So essentially, instead of putting talent or capabilities as a priority, putting self-preservation as a priority. So putting someone in charge that he knows is going to be loyal as a more important factor than someone who's going to do a proper job. That's paranoia in action. Okay.
Yes, exactly.
Let's go back to we talked about it briefly earlier, and that's the progress that Russia's having. You're talk about it being incremental. It is incremental, but it's still substantial, or at least symbolically substantial positions. Pokrov's being the most substantial position right now. Now, it's lost its strategic importance to Ukraine. It's lost it a while ago, but it is a big win for Russia as part of their goal of annexing the entire Donbass. What are your thoughts on the battlefield progress that Russia's having right now? The casualty figures, I get different numbers from different people, so it's hard to know what the casualties are on each side. But what are your thoughts on the progress? Are you concerned? Because I know you're very critical of Russia. Are you concerned about that progress? Is it expected? Because people have been saying Pokrov's going to fall since end of last year. And do you think Ukraine has any chance of being able to push back Russian forces as they have a very, very long time ago?
So I kind of changed my content, if you can call this way, strategy maybe a year ago, because for the same reasons. I was giving map updates, every single daily news updates during the first year or two of the active phase of war. And then, just the changes became incremental. I cannot make 10 videos in a row saying Ukrainians just surrounded Russians in this Pokrovsk, and then next video, Ukrainians surrounded Russians in the next street of Pokrovsk. So this was extremely repetitive. It was boring for the viewers. It just speaking for 20 minutes about something what can be summarized in 10 seconds. And me as a Russian citizen person who loves Russia but does not like exactly the regime, I was like, okay, let's switch the content. Let's make it more like protecting the reputation, the image of Russia in front of the entire world. Because there are good Russians, there are good people. Not every single one of us supports the regime of Putin. So this became more or less my direct. This became my main content. Like once again, trying to save the reputation, whatever reputation of Russia was left. Coming back to Pokrov's question, so for this reason, I'm not actively that much watching the frontline updates anymore, but I do hear about what's happening in Pokrovsk. But just like you said, people a year ago were saying Pokrovsk has fallen, Russia opened its final highway to capture the rest of Donbass region. And then 1 year later, if I kept making frontline updates, I'll have 200 videos about Pokrovsk update. The battle is not maybe as significant as Bakhmut or Avdiivka, Marinka. Yes, maybe it is the most significant battle of 2025. But I think it is more worthy for me personally. There are other YouTubers who speak about frontline updates, and for the viewers, I think this is more than enough to have one person, 2 person maximum who speaks about the frontline updates. But once again, I try to do something different, try to protect the reputation of Russians in front of the world now.
Can you explain that a bit further? I'm actually fascinated. So you're Russian. You obviously would like Russia to do well, it's your home country, but you're critical of Putin and the regime, and I'm guessing you're critical of the war, okay? For someone in your position, you know how whenever anyone watches a war and watches developments, no one could deny there's a side of them that would be happy if one side wins, even though they don't admit it on the mic. If Russia has some progress, they might be objective on the mic, but deep down they're like, yes. Or vice versa. If Ukraine managed to push back Russia and had some wins, they might be objective on the mic, but again, be happy for Ukraine. What do you feel in here? Who do you want to win in here? Being someone's critical of the regime, critical of the war, but a Russian.
I don't want the invaders, the aggressors to win, obviously. I don't want them to be just completely crushed. I don't want the country to collapse completely, but I don't want the aggressors, invaders to win. So lands must be restored. I know it's at this point it's pretty much impossible. That's it. The Russian army soldiers are ingrained in these new lands they captured. It's going to be nearly impossible to get them out of there. So for this reason, most likely we will not see a reversal of map changes. So I do not want, let's call it like this, I do not want Russia to succeed in conquering Ukraine. I do not want Russia to lose, and I'm not saying lose war, I just don't want Russia to lose. But I don't want to see
that's a
them
good point.
conquering Ukraine. So yes, that's my position.
And another question as well, as again, I appreciate your tricky position as a Russian. Another question is, who do you blame for the war? You know, the two arguments. One of them is Putin's territorial. He wants as much territory as possible. You can go to the extreme of that Putin is the new Nazi. And the other argument that no, Putin is protecting Russia against NATO expansion. NATO expanded since the 90s after the promise of not 1 inch eastwards. Where do you stand on that argument, on the root causes of the war?
Well, Putin did make the announcement. It's literal quote of him on February 24, 2022, when he's sitting in his Kremlin cabinet. And he said, it was my decision, like this is a literal quote, I'm just translating in English, obviously. It was my decision to initiate the special military operation. He literally said like this, he took full responsibility. Before this, I don't know, 1 or 2 days before this, there was a meeting of this, I think it was meeting of Security Council. Majority of these inner circle people are no longer there, either dead or extinguished or purged, or just not being able to be close to Putin. But Sergei Naryshkin, I think, was the guy. He was standing on the podium, Putin was sitting like this. Putin was sitting like this, and he's like, stop mumbling, say what you want to say. And Naryshkin was like, I support what you proposed. Like, he was forcing the inner circle, he was forcing his followers to also kind of take the responsibility in sharing the blame. And then once again, 2 days later, he said, it was my decision to initiate the special military operation. So yeah, who else to blame if
but
he
why?
literally
So
said
no, the
himself?
question, he's the one, true. Obviously, he's the one that made the decision to invade Ukraine. But do you think he invaded it for more territory, for territorial ambitions? Obviously, denazification, I don't like to even discuss that. I think it's just a illogical excuse. But territorial ambitions is one argument. And the other argument is NATO expansion. If you have, and you know, people say this all the time, if China had missiles in Cuba or in Canada, I'm sure Trump wouldn't be too happy. Do you think that NATO expansion played any role in Putin making that decision? Maybe not the sole role, but any role whatsoever?
In the beginning of 2000s, Putin, I think there was even some talks, maybe unserious talks, but even Putin mentioned is that this would be nice if even Russia will be, maybe not the member of the NATO, but maybe if it's like some kind of ally of NATO. Like, obviously it never happened, as we all know now.
Clinton and Obama, Clinton and Obama told him no.
Yes, exactly.
Allegedly,
And this is once again what, yes. And this is what kind of started like this complex for Putin that somebody told no to me. Like, if they don't want to play with me, I'll show them. So this what kind of started this complex in Putin's, like he started blaming NATO for everything. So yes, this was one of the greatest possible excuses he could have found to start the invasion.
But is it? Do you think it's a good, not to justify the invasion, but do you think it played a role in his decision when he's like, NATO's right on my border. They're adding the biggest military base in Europe now in Romania, for example. They're increasing their missile defense system in other NATO members near Russian borders. Would that have played a role? And obviously what happened in 2014 in Ukraine.
It was a good excuse, but then once again, as soon as NATO started accepting new members, Sweden, Finland, especially Finland, because the border increased like dramatically, the border between NATO countries, and Russia increased dramatically with Finland. So as soon as this turned out to be a complete failure, the narrative that NATO is responsible for everything that's happening right now is still there. But it's not like you don't feel it as the main argument that much anymore. It is back to bad Ukrainians, bad Nazis, bad drug addicts in the power inside Kiev, territorial ambitions, they never fully acknowledge it. Yes, we are kind of protecting our Russians, but it was never our plan to take these territories. Oh, conveniently it happened that Russian people live there, so, well, okay, now it's our territory, but they never fully acknowledged, especially propagandists, that the original goal was to take a part of Ukraine for Russia. It was like a convenient bonus that it happened along the war, so why not? Why shouldn't we take it? So this is kind of the narrative, it feels like.
But if you add the Maidan revolution and the regime change that happened in Ukraine, we've had the recorded call between US officials talking about who to select as the next leader of Ukraine. all these factors, if Putin's sitting watching his biggest border nation going through that massive change and talking about joining NATO, that became acceptable, and a lot of people in the West, in the US, were talking about Ukraine joining NATO and opening up that possibility. That seems like a red line being crossed. And there's, I can't remember which official, US official, warned the president at the time, this is a red line. Ukraine joining NATO is a red line, yet they kept talking about Ukraine joining NATO.
They kept talking it, but every single pretty much meaningful, powerful enough person, I guess, already knows that it's not going to happen. Maybe, and most likely, there is a good chance at least, Ukraine will be accepted to the European Union or anything like this, but NATO, like, I think even Zelensky himself at some point already said, or not said, but like kind of stopped promoting this idea that we'll be in NATO. Maybe the people who do still speak about it are just some also Ukrainian generals or anything like this, they still believe in it, but I think even Zelensky himself in his mind already accepted the fact that there is not going to be Ukraine in NATO at all, never at this point.
Yeah, it's an argument I've heard before, is that they talk about Ukraine joining NATO, but no one really took it seriously. Now, by the way, my position is that I think NATO expansion did play a key role in the war. Doesn't justify. I think Putin is to blame. Invading a country is a red line no one should cross. But I feel the worst for Ukraine. I feel Ukraine is being caught with NATO military expansion and greed and power grabs on that side, and same thing on the Russian side. Defensive power grabs, you could call it, and crossing that red line. I want to go to the last question I have for you, as someone that studied economics and covered this as well. We've seen one of the biggest actions that Trump has taken against Putin. So Trump started off as being pretty supportive of Putin, very critical of Zelensky, including that shouting match in the White House. But that evolved into, especially after their meeting in Alaska, Trump applied some of the worst sanctions against Russia, against Lukoil and Rosneft, which control about 2/3 of Russia's oil exports. And that led to even Chinese state companies halting the purchase of, or a majority of the purchases of these oil imports as well from Russia. So they're hitting Russia directly where it hurts, what funds the war. And if you link that to what happened with India cutting, or at least promising to cut oil imports from Russia by 50% by the end of the year, and now talks of a new trade deal between India and the US, and similar talks with Turkey, it seems that Trump's new strategy is to focus on Russia's economy. Will this work? How much of an impact do you think this is happening?
It is almost, very good point, very good question. It is almost impossible to talk with Putin just like, I don't know, man to man, face to face. Promises are never kept, handshakes mean nothing, agreements fall apart. Pretty much it is impossible to just persuade him. It is impossible to get an apology from Putin. It is impossible to acknowledge him that he was in the wrong, to get forces back, to stop the war in the conversation in this kind of manner. So what's left then? Economy, yes, why not? Why shouldn't they try and affect or maybe ruin the Russian economy? Like you mentioned, yes, it is the biggest fund of the military, of the Russian military in Ukraine, Russian military in general, the oil profits, because that's pretty much is the only thing, which is, I don't know the exact percentage, but I'm almost certain the majority of military funding comes from the oil profits and oil-related everything. So yes, if you hit them where it hurts, Russia's two biggest customers, China, India, either not willing to buy that much oil anymore, or even dictating their own prices, because now when there's when there's not that many customers of your product, when it's just pretty much two of them, or at least the biggest one, now they are the ones who start having the control over the prices. Because Putin can no longer say, okay, if China doesn't want to buy my oil, I'm going to send it to Canada, America, whoever. Now it is China saying that, okay, if you don't give us this price, we are not going to buy it, and that's it. Now suddenly Russia loses 20% of the military funding. So now it is China and India who can dictate the rules to the Russian oil prices. And long story short, yes, this can significantly impact, this can stall the military progress, this can stall the war. War stops, people start thinking, people start analyzing, coming back all to the original discussions we had at the beginning of this show, that now it's the people are thinking, what was it all worth it? And so yes, maybe through the economy, the transition back to the normal peaceful times also, we spoke about it, that people will simply not want to work for 4 times less money with the double-digit inflation and prices still remaining high. Maybe this could be one of these pressure points that can force Putin not maybe to lay his hand, but significantly change the situation on the battlefield, that maybe something internally will start happening in Russia, which will force in some way or another the end, or at least the freezing of the conflict.
Who has the biggest say in when the war ends, Putin or Xi Jinping?
Putin, I guess. Well, he's the only one who can just say, because even if there is no China, once again, Putin is a very proud person. Once again, when NATO said no to him, he became like, okay, if you don't want to play with me, I'm not going to play with you. So, okay, if China not going to buy oil from Russia, if this is what you mean, Putin will do everything possible to find new customers, I don't know, or whatever, Argentina, Bolivia,
China,
Peru, some African countries, and he's like, okay, you're not buying it, but I still, look at me, I still found people who buy my oil. So he will do everything possible, whatever
you think he can
possible.
continue the war even without Chinese support? He can still continue the war.
China is also not that much, looks like, interested in Russia winning, to be honest, because like China, India, Russia, BRICS countries, they kind of a union, but don't you think, I mean, China would want to see weak Russia so they can kind of grab the influence,
which is why they want,
establish the
but that's
control.
why they want the war. True, but that's why they would want the war to continue, for Russia to become weaker and weaker, and the US to keep getting distracted from expanding in the South China Sea and protecting Taiwan. So China has a big interest in continuing the war and weakening Russia.
To keep weakening Russia, but at some point there should happen when, okay, now Russia is weak enough, now let's act. And this is when China, okay, no more this, no more that, give us, I don't know, like regions, Khabarovsk or whatever, regions on top of Mongolia. This is our places now. There was even integration in these regions above Mongolia, I forgot unfortunately the name, where a lot of already Chinese workers work there. Chinese companies, they rented Russian land for 50 years. They are doing agriculture there, farms, I don't know, working, like some prices in stores are in yuan already. Some languages in the local restaurants are in Chinese first and then in Russian. So the silent invasion is kind of already happening.
Yeah, you did a video about it. I was recently doing 20 or 50-year leases on territory that borders Russian territory that borders China, and what you called it is like an indirect Chinese invasion of Russia without actually having a military invasion. I think that's what you called it.
Yes.
Artem,
yes.
Absolute pleasure to meet you. Thank you so much for your time. It's been a great discussion, and I hope we do it again, man. Thank you so much, and congrats on your success with YouTube.